Hey guys, welcome to the week 4 lecture over chapter 3, storage. Before we get started, I want to do a couple of housekeeping announcements. So last week we had a little bit of downtime. As far as talking to IT, looks like everything's been resolved. So let me know if you continue to experience any issues. Feel free to email me. Additionally, SAMS, I've had a couple of questions about the SAMS project. I've checked. Everybody should now be enrolled in my section, and there is a project folder for SAMS details in Blackboard. So any questions that you have, if you can't find it in the SAMS project folder or you don't see it in any of the announcements, just shoot me an email, let me know. We should be ready to go. For the SAM projects, the first set are going to be due September 25th. And that's going to be the due date for all of those group of projects. For Excel, I believe it is. I'm sorry, not Excel. It's for PowerPoint. And if you're using a Mac, there are a couple of items that you will not be able to complete. Nothing significant, just one or two small things, and we've been made aware of those, so those will not count against you. Going forward, however, though, you will need to make sure that you're using Office 2011 on your Mac. Right now, the university is not supporting 2016 as of yet. So shoot me an email if you've got any questions about that. And then finally, as far as housekeeping goes, our first test for this semester is going to be over chapters 1 and 2, and that will open, the window for that will open Thursday afternoon, and it will close Saturday afternoon. So details on that to come, but know that you'll have to sit and take it all at once. And if you don't start Saturday, you will not be able to take that test. So go ahead and make sure that you get that done and look for the details on that. Okay, I think that's it. We're ready to get started. Here are the learning objectives for chapter 3. I'll give you a second to read over those. Okay. So for this chapter, we're going to be talking about storage systems. We talked briefly, or at least you should have read briefly last week, about the difference between the volatile and non-volatile storage types. So we're talking this week about non-volatile storage. So this is storage on items that you will store something on and go back and retrieve it from. So you won't lose it when your computer is turned off or when you lose power. And the two primary components for the storage systems that we're talking about this week, we're going to be medium and the device. So the storage medium, for example, would be the actual CD or your flash memory card or your DVD that your movie or music is on. And then the device refers to the device that actually reads or retrieves that data. So for instance, you use your DVD player to play your DVD or your CD player to play your CD, so on and so forth. And these can be both internal and external. And then again, it's just to note that we're referring this week only to the non-volatile storage systems. And when we're accessing the data or information on these systems, there's two ways to actually access that. And it will be based on the type of system that you're using. So either you can get random or sequential access. Random access is where you can go in and retrieve the data from any location on the storage medium. Virtually all storage devices are moving towards random access. So this would be in a CD or a DVD where you can skip ahead to a certain part and go straight from one part of a, let's say a music CD, from one part of the CD to another part. So the beginning of one song to the end of another song. Versus sequential access, if you've ever seen or used a cassette tape, you know that you can't skip and fast forward in the same way that you can with a CD or DVD. You have to fast forward or rewind from the beginning to where you want to go or from the end to where you want to go. So that's sequential, and that's kind of the difference between those. And so this week we'll be looking at the different types of storage technology. So we're going to discuss briefly magnetic. These are conventional hard drives. We'll look at optical drives, and then we'll look at flash memory media, which uses electrons, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. And so when we are actually storing items, let's look at what and how we're storing. So whatever it is that we're storing, whether it be a program, document, a picture, or a song, these things are called files. So we save a file and we give it a file name. So that's just the name that we use to go in and retrieve it. And so when we save it, we typically save it in a folder. So that's just the place, the name place on the medium where we've stored the files. So we've got the file, we've given it a file name, and we stored it in a folder. And when we are looking to go in and retrieve the information or the file, there's two ways that you can kind of look at that. So there is logical file representation and then the physical file representation. And so when we're talking about the difference, logical file representation is just that it's logical. If I download a song from iTunes or from wherever I'm getting music from, and I save it to my desktop, and I tell somebody I've saved this song to my desktop, that's the logical file representation. I'm looking at my song in its entirety and where it actually is. Now, from the computer or the system's perspective, it would look at it in the physical file representation. So not necessarily where I saved it, but where it is physically located. So when we talk a little bit about hard drives, in just a minute, you'll see it will come a little bit more together. So a hard drive has different sections and sectors. So it may not be that this song is actually stored in a part of the hard drive labeled desktop, and then whatever folder I saved it on the desktop, it could be broken up into chunks and saved in 2 or 3 different locations, or pieces of it can be saved in 2 or 3 different locations on the hard drive. So that's the physical file representation, is where it is actually stored, my file, versus where I'm looking at the file, where the representation of it, and where I've saved it. So let's talk about hard drives. Hard drives are a basic primary storage device. Typically, they can be internal or external, and these are what is used to store the biggest programs, data, the things that kind of run the computer, the software programs that we use most times are saved in our hard drive. These can be encrypted or unencrypted, and primarily what we've seen or what we're transitioning from using are magnetic hard drives. So these are the hard drives. You may have seen them where they are enclosed and they have the round disk inside. So in addition to the round magnetic disk, they also have read-write heads that kind of move across the disk, and that's how they read and write the data to the hard drive. Again, these are the primary type of hard drives that we use today and what we're moving from as far as our hard drives are concerned. Again, hard drives can be internal or external, and here we've got pictures of external hard drives. So these hard drives are ones that you would use for their portability. So you take them back and forth and you would hook them up to different computers if you're working on something on campus and then you want to work on it at home, or you're working on something at work. These are used, again, for their portability, so you can take them back and forth with you. The biggest difference is that with an internal hard drive, it is physically connected to the inside of your computer, and you typically don't remove these. The only time you would remove these is if you're either A, replacing it because it's damaged, or B, replacing it because you're upgrading. Versus with an external hard drive, it's common to get 1 or 2 of these. I don't want to say a semester, but whenever you run out of one, a lot of times we've seen that they're not as big as the internal hard drives, but that's changing, and we'll talk about that a little more later in the lecture too. So as far as magnetic hard drives go, this is an image or representation of the disk that are inside of the traditional magnetic hard drive. You'll see that there are the disk, and these things kind of spin inside of the hard drive, and that's where your data is stored. You'll see that it's broken up into tracks, sectors, and clusters, and then cylinders. So there's a little explanation. I'll let you guys read over that. But that's the traditional hard drive, magnetic drive that is more common today and that we're kind of moving away from. Next, let's talk a little bit about SSDs or solid state drives. So these use a flash memory technology, and we're moving more towards these as we're using more portable devices, more portable computers, and we're putting hard drives in everyday devices like our watches and things like a Fitbit. So those kind of use the flash memory technology. So the difference between a solid state hard drive and a traditional magnetic hard drive is that with the magnetic hard drives, it had the little heads that kind of move back and forth with the disk. And the SSD or the solid state drives, they don't have any moving parts. So it's going to take less power. Then it's going to be a little more durable, because with a solid state drive versus a magnetic drive, if you drop it, you don't have to worry about necessarily knocking the heads out of place or damaging the spinning disk. So, and then another reason that it's faster is because with your SSDs, you don't have the actual disk that are spinning. And so when you have the disk inside the hard drive that are spinning and the heads that have to move to the different sections of the hard drive, that is your disk access time. So that is composed of the time it takes the hard drive to read or write data. So that is the seek time, the rotational delay, and the data movement time. And again, all of this goes along with the magnetic hard drives where it's actually moving and spinning inside of that hard drive. And that's one of the reasons SSDs are quicker, because they don't require that seek time and the rotational delays. And then we've got a hybrid drive. So this is a combination of the flash memory drive and then the magnetic hard drive. So it will use flash memory for the cache, and then it will use a traditional magnetic hard drive for the programs or the data that you will use less frequently. So if you're using a program or you've got something open, that will be moved to the cache traditionally so that you can access it. And then the items that you access most often will be saved in the cache. That way you can get to them quicker. And then other files or other programs that you're using will be stored in the traditional magnetic. Okay. So now there is something called partitioning. So what partitioning is when you divide your hard drive into multiple smaller drives. And you will not physically do this. It's done digitally. So what happens is, imagine you've got one big room and you partition this into smaller rooms that you'll use for different things. Well, that's the same kind of logic, the same kind of idea. And so you would use a partition as a recovery partition or a new drive or a dual boot system. So as far as recovery goes, if you have a file or a program that you don't want to lose, you'd have it on your primary hard drive, and then you partition and have a backup kind of hard drive so that if you lose it on your primary, then you have that backup. And then a dual boot system, we may get into that later in the semester, but that's just where you can have multiple boot systems. Now let's talk about optical disc and optical disc drives. So this is what we're seeing now with the different type of media that we're consuming. So we see this more in movie disc, audio disc, and things like that. So it's today's standard for software delivery. So what this is that instead of using the read and write heads, it's going to use a laser beam to kind of read and write the information to the disk. So it can either write it completely to the disk or it can just change the reflectivity. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we go into the different types of disks that are out there. So this is a picture of or representation of an optical disc. So you'll see that kind of like the magnetic disc in the hard drive that we talked about earlier, it's got tracks and then it's got sectors. The difference between this is that it's using kind of a laser beam, and you can see where it's got the land and the pit. And so it just reads it differently using the laser beam. It's not necessarily the pits, it's the distance between those is what actually has the ones and the zeros and the information on the disk itself. So with optical drives and disks, you've got three categories. Now we've got the CD, we've got a DVD, and we've got Blu-ray. And you can have three types of these. They can be read-only, recordable, or rewritable. And you may have also heard people say that these are backwards compatible or downward compatible. So what this means is that they will play or support the most recent previous version. So if I have a CD, I can typically play it in a DVD player. Or if I have a DVD, I can play it in a Blu-ray player. So that's what the backwards or downwards compatibility is. But typically they don't go forward. So if I only have a CD player, I can't play a DVD. And the same goes for a DVD player. I typically can't play a Blu-ray disc. However, I can go backwards, typically just not forwards. I'll have to get the next system up if I want to be able to use that next type of disc. So when we're talking about these discs, this can support single or dual layer disc, meaning how much and where you can write to these discs. Recording, and you may have heard people talking about burning discs. That's what recording is. The recording is typically called burning. And then again, these two can be both internal or external. So the major advantage of optical disc is the capacity. Typically, CDs will be single layer and they'll hold just a small amount of data. So 650 to about 750, to about 700 megabytes. And then if you kind of look, you can see where the DVDs and the Blu-ray disc can hold quite a bit more data. So that's where we're seeing discs that are double-sided. We are holding a lot more information on these discs. And so what this is used for, and here is another slide with the actual capacity and what we're doing with these discs. But if you think about what these are used for, go back and listen to a CD and listen to the quality of it, and then go and listen to a DVD or watch a movie that's been saved to a CD or a DVD, and then watch it on a Blu-ray. You'll notice that as there's more capacity, you can put more information on the disc. So that's why you'll see that with a CD versus a DVD versus a Blu-ray disc, that the picture and the sound and the quality of whatever you're listening to or consuming rather, it becomes richer because there's more nuanced sound and imagery that can be held on those particular discs. So that's why we're seeing a transition to these types of discs and why we're working so hard to make these discs have a larger and larger capacity. So now let's talk about the difference between the different types of discs. So with a read-only disc, it's exactly like it sounds. You can only read from it. And typically you'll see this when you have purchased or been given stuff to consume. So software programs, music, movies, and games, typically if you're buying the disk, it's going to be a read only. So that means it comes with what's been put on there, and that's it. You can't do anything else with it. Now this will be versus a recordable disk. So with these, typically you get these and they're blank, and then you can record on them. So if you are in a class and you've got to do a presentation, or if you have a file that you want to turn in or give to somebody, you can put it on a recordable disk. So you can write on them, but that's going to be the only information that you can put on that. You can only use it once. So the difference between these and rewritable disks is how many times you can use them. So with a recordable or just a writable disk, you can write on it once. With a rewritable or an RW disk, you can use them multiple times. So you can write something on it, you can use it, you can erase it, and then you can rewrite something on it. So you can use it multiple times. So that's the difference between the three, between the non-writable, the recordable, and the rewritable. So now let's look at flash memory systems. Flash memory, that's a newer type of storage system. And we see this in tablets, phones. This is chip-based storage that represents data using electrons. So we'll see this primarily used in the solid-state drives and the hybrid hard drives. Again, this is where there are no moving parts. It's smaller, more compact, and that's why we've seen them used primarily in smaller portable devices. That's what you're going to want it used for, something that you're going to take with you, that you want fast access to the data. And typically it's not, or in the past it hasn't been used like your traditional desktop computer. So it's wanted something that's going to be able to load your information and data as quickly as possible. And so now with the invention of tablets and where we're using tablets and laptops more, you'll see these drives getting bigger capacity and they're getting faster and faster. So the different types of flash media storage systems. If you look at the screen, you'll see that there are several different types of mini cards. So between secure digital, memory sticks, compact flash, there are several flash memory cards. And so what we have seen is that these cards can contain one or more chips. They'll use a controller chip, and then they'll have the metal contacts where you connect the card to the device that's going to actually read and pull that data off. And so typically what we've seen is that they're available in various formats, but they are not interchangeable. So if you buy a particular type of card, you have to have a reader that fits it. So it's not going to be backwards or forwards compatible, so to speak. You've got to get one for whatever you're reading. And so then you'll see that you've got cards for your digital camera, and they may not fit in your gaming console, where you'll have another card, and then that may not fit in whatever else you're using with the different cards. The cards will be fit for whatever the device you're using it with. So in general, there are the general purpose flash cards, and then there are the specialized flash cards. So that's what we just talked about, the specialized cards, where you've got a gaming card for your game consoles, or you've got a card for your video camera, and then there are cards that are used for professional digital cameras. Then we've got the more general purpose, which is like a flash drive card. Now these are going to be, flash drives, excuse me. So these are going to be the flash memory that you will probably have the most familiarity with. So typically you'll use these to transport documents or your assignments. If you have presentations, you'll save them to your flash drive or jump drive, and you can take them back and forth. So these have been very popular lately as kind of advertising mediums. So you'll see that companies will mold flashcards or flash drives into trinkets or different items kind of associated with their business. And people really have kind of enjoyed that because you kind of get a dual purpose out of it. And then you can actually still store it and use it as a traditional flash or jump drive. And so there are several other types of storage systems out there still. Um, we're going to talk a little bit more about more robust systems versus the simple systems that you would use just primarily for your home use. So these systems usually are network and cloud storage. So we'll talk first about network storage. Network storage is where it's going to either connect directly to your computer or to a network, and multiple computers will access the system. So there's the NAS and the SAN. The NAS is network attached storage, whereas SAN is storage area network. So with the NAS, and you'll see it in the picture on the right, typically that is a high performance storage system, and it's connected individually to a network. So you'll see these with small businesses, or we've seen them more used now in home use for media sharing. So if you have a NAS unit, you might want to share your pictures or movies for multiple devices in your house. And then with your SAN or your storage area network, it's a separate network or hard drive or other storage device that's attached to the main network. So for instance, if you have several computers that are saving information to one unit in a small business, that's pretty much where you'll see that. And then we've got cloud storage. So you may be familiar with cloud storage through sites like Dropbox, Flickr and Facebook, Google Docs. They will all have some type of cloud storage that you can access. We've seen where these sites all have components of a cloud storage section on them where you have your own section to store your files. And then we've seen these increasingly being used for backup purposes. So you'll go to, say, Dropbox, and you'll back up your documents or your pictures or your music. And that's where we've seen the growth of this cloud storage. Next, we'll look at smart cards. And again, with the previous storage mediums that we've discussed, we've pretty much discussed home and small business use where you would have been in control of the data or information. With a smart card, it's kind of the opposite of that. Somebody's going to put that information on a card and allow you access to it. So for instance, if you're looking at a smart card to access a secure facility, you're going to have somebody, maybe a security department, that's going to provide the information on the employee, put that on the card, and then the employee will use that to access the different secure locations or the facility itself, or even the systems in that facility. And so as the employee gets more and more access or more security, then that will be changed accordingly. Same thing with your smart cards for vending machines and access in other places. So if you go in and you want to use your big red dollars at a vending machine that's equipped to accept big red dollars, it'll be based on however much money you got in your big red account. So of course you can control that by putting money in the system, but you don't actually go in and load the card. Somebody else will load the card and you have access to it. So that's kind of what the smart card is. It's pretty much the size of a credit card, and it will contain computer components, and then it stores typically a small amount of data, just that data related to what it's used for. And then we'll talk about storage systems for large systems. So with all of this data that is being created, businesses will definitely need a place to store that. This is different from our personal use, because if you look at more like a Facebook or a LinkedIn or even a hospital, there's so much data, not just between the people that are using, but all of the records that are kept, all of different keeping track of who's accessing files, not just the files. So a business needs storage for all of these different components of their business filing and data needs. It's actually been estimated that data is going to double. The amount of data being produced is going to double every 2 years through 2020. If you look at, you're taking a picture, you put it on Facebook, you share it, how many times is that same photo or that same image shared over and over and over again? How many times is it going to be pulled down and used and accessed? So think of it that way. So then we'll see storage servers and large storage systems for businesses. So again, kind of like a NAS, only on a bigger scale. So these hard drives are going to hold more, and then the system itself is going to hold more hard drives. So the image here shows a storage system that can manage up to 240 hard drives. So each hard drive will probably have different types of data on it. And then, of course, some may be for backup. But that's pretty much what we're going to now. We're seeing that businesses need more and more space, and so the systems can hold more and more. RAID, redundant arrays of independent disks, is a method for storing data on 2 or more hard drives that work together. So now, typically what we see RAID for, it's used to increase fault tolerance. So what I mean when I talk about fault tolerance, if we lose something on a hard drive, typically it's gone unless you know how to go in and recreate it. Well, when you're using a RAID, your goal is to mitigate the loss of your data. So if you have multiple locations that your data is stored, or if you're setting up your RAIDs, there's multiple ways you can set your RAID up. And then that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to retrieve data from a second hard drive or a second location if it's lost from the first location. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So here we're looking at striping and mirroring. And these are the 2 primary types of RAID levels that you use. So now the first is where you take your data and you break it apart across the multiple drives. So this, again, kind of think back to when we were talking about your physical location on your computer, how a piece of a file may be stored in one place and a piece of a file may be stored in another place. It's the same concept. So that way you can recreate it if you lose one drive versus losing everything. And then there's mirroring. So mirroring takes that a step further, and instead of breaking a file apart, it just duplicates it. So mirroring is where you have one file in multiple locations. So it's the complete file. And then there is, other than that, those are the primary 2. So the rest of the RAID levels are just a combination of those 2, the striping and the mirroring. Magnetic tape systems, and bear with me, we're almost to the end. So these are going to be kind of square kind of tape looking backup systems, and pretty much what they're used for. They are sequential access only. They're primarily used for backup and archival purposes. So you're not going to see these in small businesses typically, because this is used when you have data that you need to get to all the time, or it's highly sensitive data. So typically where you'll see these, banks, where you're needing client financial data, they'll back up their information daily or multiple times a day. And then another place where you'll see this is in medical facilities. So you'll see this where You'll have patient data, patient medical records, and healthcare records. They'll be backed up again nightly or at the end of different shifts, and that's what this is. So this will keep all the data on the little card, and then this is actually stored someplace safe, either off-site at a high-level employee's home or off-site at another business location. That way, if something happens to the information that's on site that night, they can go back and pull the information that's been backed up on these tapes and kind of minimize the downtime. They can hopefully kind of get back up to where they were the day before. So that's what the magnetic tape is used for. And typically it's at a certain point in time, obviously. So finally, when you are looking at evaluating your storage needs and your alternatives, some of the things that you'll want to look for are listed on the screen, because I'm not going to need the same equipment or the same level of software that a bank or a medical facility would need. But then again, if I've got class grades and I've got data that I'm sharing across the university, then I may need a little more robust storage system than you might use right now. So that's something that you'll need to think about when you're evaluating your storage needs and your storage alternatives. You'll want to look at the speed, how quickly can you save your data, how quickly can you access it, will it work with the system that you're using or any system that you plan to use, storage capacity, convenience, portability. All of these are factors that you'll want to consider. And right now, most users kind of require hard drives that are portable, fast, and big. We need a lot of space. We're creating a lot of data. We're sharing a lot of data. And that's what we're seeing now, a trend towards higher capacity, more robust systems. So that's it. And again, this has been kind of a high-level overview of the chapter. I would encourage you to read the chapter and follow up. That way you can go over the things that I didn't go over, and you will have maybe get a little bit more understanding of some of the things that you may have questions about. So again, let me know if you have any issues, and keep an eye out for your information on your test, because that will be coming out soon. And again, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.